Okay, we are recording. Chris, how are you today?
I'm not too bad, mate. How are you?
I'm all right. I'm all right. Thank you, mate. Where are you? That looks like a kind of studio type setup you got there.
Yeah, it's a home studio setup. It used to be my wife's dressing room. I kicked her out into the box room and turned it into my own little studio space.
Needs must and all that. Wonderful. Well, look, we're gonna have a lovely chat over the next hour, and we're gonna talk about some great records. I've seen your song picks, and they're absolutely fantastic. We kick off the chat always in the same way, and I'm going to ask you to start your playlist by telling me the song that you regard as having the greatest ever intro, please, Chris.
Well, this was a tricky one. Obviously, being a rock music fan, intros are quite a prominent part of that. There's a lot I could have gone for, but I went for a song that probably had the first kind of big impact on me. And it was the first song I ever learned to play on the guitar, and that's Smoke on the Water, Deep Purple. Such an iconic riff. As soon as it kicks off, you know what it is straight away. Um, and yeah, that was the very first song I ever learned to play on guitar. And it was actually the very first song I did at a gig with my dad's band when I was 9 years old. So.
Oh, fantastic. Tell me a little bit about your approach as a musician to witnessing and watching how, going back to when you was 9 years old on stage with your dad, the way that people would listen to music then is far different to how they listen to music now. We're seeing the importance for many artists of utilizing things like Spotify and streaming services, and what we see with that is it being a wash with thousands and thousands of artists uploading tracks to there every day. So you've got to kind of stand out. So I think sometimes that can put pressure on artists to kind of really make them intros as hooky and as instant as possible. Sometimes you see them with maybe more commercial pop acts start with a chorus, and just to kind of try and get heard. And we're even seeing apps like TikTok being used a lot now, for bands, and also for kind of more sort of, I guess, heritage bands getting a resurgence in their career as well through a song all of a sudden appearing on TikTok and going viral. And I've had it where my kids are singing something like, "Where the hell do you know that from?" And they're like, "Oh, it's
Yeah.
popping on TikTok," and which makes me feel very old. But with all of these kind of changes in the industry, and emphasis on, I guess, things having to be quite fast, because it feels to me that generations coming through, the attention spans are getting shorter just because of how they're getting their media.
Yeah.
In a roundabout way, I've gone right round the houses here, Chris. But does any of this stuff filter through into your creative process?
Um, Not too much. I mean, I'm not like a TikTok artist, you know what I mean? I like TikTok as a user, actually. It's probably my favorite app as a user. I think the algorithm is probably the best out of all of the apps, and I get served with lots of stuff that I want to watch, podcast stuff, comedian stuff, and I discover a lot of new bands, artists, and vocalists, and that's kind of what I'm into. And as an app, it works really, really well. You're exactly right. I mean, I get a little bit tired of this whole, social media things like, oh, you've got to grab people in the first second, and it's just like, you know, everything is so planned out. Nothing is natural on any of these apps anymore. Everyone that's like made it big on any of these apps or anything like that, it's all thoroughly planned out and designed. Everything they do is designed to hook you in, and it all just feels like a little bit manipulative to me. It's not
Yeah,
really what I'm into as an artist. I of course fall victim to it myself. Like I said, I'm a big TikTok user. It is my favorite app. Um, but yeah, it's not really. It doesn't enter into my creative process. But this kind of thing isn't like necessarily completely brand new. Back if you think of like radio and things like that, like singles. There's this old thing like, well, if a song's going to be a single, you've got to hit the chorus within like the first 45 seconds and all this kind of stuff. No big long intros, if you want a song to be able to get airplay. So, I mean, that certainly is something that I bear in mind when writing. I don't let it restrict me. I'm a big chorus fan. I don't know if that's almost sounds like a bit of a ridiculous thing to say, but
Not at all.
I'm a sucker for like a big sing along, big hooks. Do you know what I mean? Like as a right hand, as a listener, I'm always drawn in like to like a big chorus. I really think probably most people are. So when I write, I do kind of have that in mind. Like, right, I want to get to the chorus quick, you know. And there's a couple of songs on my new album where we do start with a chorus, or at least start with kind of maybe like the hooky end part, the
Yeah,
tagline of the chorus or something like that. Um, but I never let it like dictate me. I won't ruin a song in order to follow a formula. Do you know what I
yeah,
mean? Like
absolutely.
if that happens to be the formula that that song follows, cool. But I won't be like, oh, I got this great song, but it could be a single. Oh, let's just chop it up and do like I wouldn't do that. You know, and I think the kind of music I do, I don't need to necessarily do that. You know, a lot of people that follow my band and the kind of music I do probably, you know, appreciate some variation and don't necessarily succumb to like, you know, the rules of what it needs to be on Radio One or whatever, you know.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Tell me the first song that you remember hearing that had an emotional impact on you, please, Chris.
Yeah, so I mean, like I started playing guitar when I was 5 years old, and I started so young because my dad was a guitar player and he was a musician. He was playing band. Back then, you know, kids could go to pubs and you know, and we used to go and watch him. My mum used to take me and my sister to watch him play like all the time, like you know, probably not every weekend, but maybe every other weekend. And it was a massive part of my childhood. So he was a huge influence on me. But his favorite artist was Gary Moore. And so, you know, a lot of the music I was listening to back then, obviously, like the internet didn't exist to the public when I was, you know, 5 years old or between, you know, we didn't get internet until maybe I was in my teens. But, you know, so the music I was listening to was what he listened to and what I could find in the house, you know, and it was tons of Gary Moore. And I used to watch his like VHSs and stuff like that. And he's got an instrumental track called The Loner.
Mm.
And you know, it's not as famous as like some of the, you know, like Prison Walkways, I Still Got the Blues or whatever. But for me, it's like it it's just got more, I don't know, maybe I can't say more passion or but for me, like it just really gripped hold of me. And it's the guitar singing, you know, it's instrumental. It's not, there's no vocals or words that you connect to. You literally, it's like pure, it's just the guitar just hitting you. And that for me was one, I used to listen to that song for like hours on end. And I learned how to play it, and it became my kind of like school talent show party piece for most of primary school. Yeah, it's a beautiful piece of music, and that I'd say, yeah, that had the biggest effect on me, you know, at an early age.
What would the emotion be if you had to pinpoint it?
Oh, it's tricky, isn't it? I suppose. I don't know. I mean, it's almost like it starts off like a little bit sad, but then like once it like builds up, it's you know when like a song turns from like sad to almost like uplifting. Do you know what I mean? It's like it's got this big like don't know, it just like grips hold of you and just takes you on this journey. I think that's probably the best way to describe it. It starts off like quite sad, but then I mean once he starts to let him rip and the song the you know the instrumentation grows as the track goes on, it's kind of got like a bit of an uplifting feel to it.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Tell me a little bit about sort of home then. Like, where was it? And obviously, your dad being a musician, I'm presuming there was music on at home all the time growing up.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, I grew up in Torquay, Devon. Still live here now. That's where I'm sat today. Um, yeah, I mean, albums like lots of vinyl that I wasn't allowed to touch. I had to get his permission. He'd have to put one on for me. You know, I remember the vinyls. There was like Rainbow, Boston, Stones, Deep Purple. You know, of course, the Queen. And then the albums, I remember Hysteria, Def Leppard. That was a big one that I used to listen to a lot. There's some Bon Jovi in there, Gary Moore. My dad loved Paul Rogers as a vocalist, so Free Bad Company was always there too. And just stuff that my dad used to play in his band. You know,
Yeah.
I used to go and watch him rehearse at the weekends, and I'd go and watch him gig. And
Yeah.
I was very fortunate to grow up in that kind of environment.
Yeah.
You know, I mean, I used to teach a lot of guitar and back in the day, and I used to teach a lot of kids. And I'd always be, oh, what music have you been listening to this week? And it was always amazing how many kids would come back and be like, I've not listened to any music. And I think like, why? Like, it's just because their parents forcing them, oh, you need to
Yeah.
learn guitar. Like, they don't even listen to music. And that to me was just like crazy because like such a huge part of my life. And it
Yeah.
formed, you know, I mean, it's formed my adult life. It's what I do
Yeah.
now, job, and get to travel the world doing it, you know. And I wouldn't have done that if I didn't grow up around, you know, real music.
Yeah. I also want to ask you, like, tell me a little bit more about like those formative years of getting into music. Like, where did martial arts factor into this?
Yeah, I mean, it's pretty much the same kind of time. So I started, I always loved like Bruce Lee films, Jean-Claude Van Damme, stuff like that. And my dad liked watching action films and stuff like that too. He wasn't really into like Bruce Lee stuff, but definitely like Jean-Claude Van Damme stuff. So there's quite a few times. I remember I watched AWOL with him, Jean-Claude Van Damme, like when I definitely shouldn't have watched it. I was like 7 years old, so. But I started karate similar kind of age to guitar, really, probably like 6-ish maybe, and then just did martial arts on and off for all of my childhood. Did, like I said, did karate. I moved on to kickboxing, and then when I left sixth form to pursue music as a career, and I was really full on with stuff. Like I had lots going on, um, and then I found that music was just like consuming my life too much, and I hadn't really done any training for a couple of years. And I had a student that did Muay Thai, and I was probably like 19, probably by this time. And I was like, I always wanted to try Muay Thai because my favorite Van Damme film was Kickboxer.
Yeah.
And also like Tong Po, and that is the greatest baddie of all time. Um,
Let's have it right. Muay Thai is the best martial art.
wow, do you know, I don't actually consider it a martial art. Like
Right. Oh, okay. What you say, the fight style?
it's a fight sport. I see it
Yeah.
as a sport. Like I did like martial. I'm not into like practicing katas and things. So like when my adult life, when I started training, like I sort of went along to this Thai boxing thing. I did a few like PTs and stuff, and I just got the bug. Like all I wanted to do was fight. I wanted to compete. I didn't care about like, you know, it might upset some people because Thai boxing does have traditions. You know, I didn't care about tradition, anything like that. I just wanted to get in there and fight, and I wanted to do that, you know, and that was it. And the same with like MMA. And I don't, yeah, I don't really count myself as like a martial artist.
Hmm.
Like I don't know. It's not really
I
like,
know what you're saying.
what I
I
mean,
know
like
what you're
I
saying.
did it for fight sports. I didn't. I trained because I wanted to like compete. I wanted to test myself against someone else.
Yeah.
You know, stand in the ring and stand in the cage against someone that's trying to, you know, take my head off, and I'm trying to take his head off. Let's see who wins. Like that's how I always saw it. And
Yeah.
I mean, I started training, and probably about 6 months after I had my first Thai boxing fight, I won my first few, and then the UFC started getting bigger with like the Ultimate Fighter. It was on Bravo and stuff like that. And you obviously have Forrest Griffin, Stephen Bonner, who won the first Ultimate Fighter final, and it just went crazy. And I remember watching that with my dad, being like, "Oh, I wouldn't mind giving this a go." And he was like, "Oh, you're crazy." And then I started training a little bit, and then it just went from there. I ended up having a few fights. Ended up going out to Vegas, training at Randy Couture's gym, Extreme Couture. And what I found is I was just getting more opportunities with the fight stuff than I was with the music stuff. I was still gigging and stuff around. I'd do like cover gigs, pubs, weddings, and that kind of stuff. Wasn't really writing much. If I was writing, it was just for me. It wasn't really getting gigged. But I said I just had more and more opportunities with the fighting stuff, and that kind of just took over my life in my 20s. You know, I spent a lot of time in Vegas, like I said, training with, you know, some of the best guys in the world. Got to spar Bondley Silva and people like that.
Wow.
It's just crazy, you know, going out for, you know, food with Vitor Belfort, and yeah, it was an amazing time.
You know,
Um,
this is my dream, right? I'm literally get to talk about MMA on my music podcast. I get to do my two favorite things at once. This is great.
Yeah, I mean, it was an amazing part of my life. I absolutely loved it. I had some of the best experiences. You know, I also spent a lot of time in Thailand with the Muay Thai stuff. Kind of went backwards and forwards from fighting MMA and fighting Muay Thai. ge- kind of just whatever came up opportunity wise, really.
Yeah.
I fought in Thailand, and got to fight in a big show in Singapore as well, Rebel FC. Yeah, it was an amazing part of my life.
Fantastic, fantastic. Right, I'm going to pull it back to music, so I'm going to get caught up in talking MMA otherwise. Tell me the song that reminds you of your time at school, please, Chris.
Yeah, like I think when I was at school, it was a great time for music. Like I said, well, obviously I started at such a young age, but like my mates and stuff weren't into guitar music. Do you know what I mean? I was the only one, like, pretty much. Maybe a couple others maybe liked that kind of stuff. But then once I got to secondary school, all of a sudden guitar music came to like the forefront of like the charts and was on TV and stuff like that. You could turn on TFI Friday and Slipknot were on it. Like, I mean, it was
Yeah,
just great. It was an amazing time. So that for me was kind of like, I'd say I look back on it really, really fondly. And that's when I started discovering my own stuff. When I kind of stepped away from what my dad liked, because my dad wasn't into metal stuff. And that's when I started getting into like heavier stuff. But for me, like one of the first kind of tracks that started getting me on that journey was a Linkin Park song called One Step Closer. I don't know if it was the first one they came over here with, but it was certainly like maybe like what the very very earlier ones
yeah,
anyway.
absolutely.
When they started coming over here and getting big. And yeah, I love that song. It's great riff, catchy, and I remember hearing them and being like, what the hell's this? Like, never heard anything like these guys before. Kind of like the rapping kind of thing. But I mean, there was like obviously new metal stuff like Limp Bizkit and all that kind of stuff. But I mean, because Chester was such a great vocalist, and then to have like this other guy like rapping as well, and the DJ stuff and all these electronic elements, but still having like heavy riffs. I just remember hearing it and just being like blown away. And
I think it was the electronics that separated them a little bit from that scene. I think lots of them kind of bands did have turntables and I guess even you talk about Limp Bizkit, he would kind of sing and rap and but I do think with Linkin Park, so much of them little kind of bleeps and tweaks really would drive melody in them songs as well, and would
yeah,
be so poignant. Uh, and yeah, I think and the way that they utilize the turntables in there, I think they utilize it so much better than any of the other bands that were doing that. I think that they definitely sort of sat in a, there was the new metal stuff. I think when you look at it, there was so many bands that come out of that, and I think for me, two that just kind of outlived them all was I think your Limp Bizkits and that just sounded so of its time, and now they're kind of almost on a sort of nostalgia tour of what they're doing now. Whereas I think Linkin Park and Deftones just
yeah,
were just different. They had a quality and a depth to it that just elevated it above, I think, a fashionable scene. And I'm not discrediting the bands in that scene, but I think they had a style that outlived a fashion. Do you know what I'm saying?
yeah. No, I definitely know what you're saying. Yeah, I mean, Deftones is another one. Love those guys, and I mean, almost don't want to put them in the new metal category. Do
Yeah,
you know what
yeah,
I mean?
yeah,
Yeah,
absolutely.
like I don't know, atmospheric alt metal. I don't know. Is that
It's shoegaze to me. It's pure shoegaze music. Like
yeah,
when I heard Minerva, I'm like, this sounds like stuff I was listening to, like UK indie stuff in 1990. It sounds like shoegaze, dreamy. Yeah. Oh,
yeah.
what an incredible band.
And Linkin Park, I mean, it's obviously it's a tragedy. I would have loved to have seen, what they would have
Yeah.
on to have done. It just would have been, maybe one of the biggest bands of all time eventually. And like you said about Limp Bizkit, I mean, I think they've had a resurgence recently, haven't they? But I think it's brilliant because they're just taking the piss out
Yeah.
themselves, just having fun with it. Fred Durst comes out dressed up as like an old man, and like
Yeah.
I think it's brilliant.
Absolutely.
I think they've played it like perfectly. And like you said, something happens, doesn't it? Bands can just have a little bit of time away and come back, and then all of a sudden people go crazy. Like, but I don't know, 10 years ago or whatever, if they tried to do a show or whatever, they probably wouldn't have shifted the tickets. But a little bit of time away, come back, and then people go nuts for it, and it's cool. I'm all for it.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. Did you enjoy your time at school?
Yes, I think so. I think overall, I went to a very good school, Churchton Grammar School. I think, yeah, I think you know, maybe some of the teachers will disagree and say, no, you're a little shit. But I think overall it was a good school, and I think the music department and the drama department was excellent, and I was heavily involved in stuff there. I mean, we had things like a school band night and stuff like that. We had a PE teacher, Mr. Eaton, who played in like local bands and stuff, and a big PA system. And he used to put on like a band night, which is just so good. Like it was a feature every year, and you'd have to like audition to do it or apply to do it at least, and you know, get shortlisted, and they'd put on like a night. And you know, it was wicked. Like that was probably my first like proper gig, like with my own band, getting to do that when I would have been like 14 or something.
So cool.
So you know, it was a very good school for supporting stuff like that.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, yeah. Wonderful. Did you, was there ever any question as to what you wanted to do? Was music always something, even at school, that you thought, this is what I want to do?
Yeah, it was a tricky one for me because you know, I always got good grades. I was always quite academic. I could have easily gone on and, you know, done a degree and done what a lot of my mates have done and gone into, you know, something. I always had a keen interest in law. That was something that I always thought would end up going on to do at university. Music was always the dream, but I always had like a thing like it's a dream, like you're not going to be able to do it, you know. Back then, it was very, very tricky. I think like I mean, we could end up talking about this for hours, really, or like, you know, how to make it in the music biz and compare it to modern day to like back then. But back then, like, it was still very much the thing, like, if you didn't live in London, then you won't be able to make it kind of thing, you know. And I'm from this sleepy little seaside town where there's not many places you can do original music or anything like that. Touring bands don't really come down this way. Um, so, you know, I always had this feeling like it was my dream, but it was just kind of a dream. I never really thought I'd be able to follow it or get anywhere with
Yeah.
it. But then ultimately I ended up leaving. I did my AS levels, and then I was about halfway through year 13, and I quit. Basically I was in a cover, I had my cover band at that time. Now cover bands in the Bay back then could do really, really well because obviously, you know, it is a tourist kind of place. And, you know, I was gigging 3, 4 nights a week when I was like 17, 18. I was making like a shit ton of money. Like, you know, I
Mm.
had to drive to school in a 3 Series BM and stuff like that when I was I had loads of money, and you know, I started writing my own songs and doing that kind of thing. And then I made a decision that I wanted to give music a go, and I got really far behind on my schoolwork. Like year 13, a lot, you know, a lot what I was doing was a lot of coursework like that was long overdue, and I just hadn't done it and had no interest in doing it. And I remember my drama teacher said to me, like, you know, why are you even here? Like, you don't do any work. Why are you even here? And I was like, that's the best thing you've ever taught me.
Yeah.
And I went home and I said to my parents, like, yeah, no, I'm going to drop out and I'm going to give music out. And they obviously weren't very happy. But then I was like, well, look, I've got my ASs. They were good grades. Like, I could give it a go for a year. Worst case scenario, I can just go back, finish my A levels, go to uni as planned, and life rolls on. As it happened, yeah, I left. You know, I can't remember. It was like maybe like February. Like, I literally only had a few months, but I was so far behind. I was never ever going to catch up. Um, and then I got a job in like a local studio, and I was teaching guitar, and I was still gigging loads. And then I started training, and then, you know, but I got to do some cool stuff. I toured the East Coast of the States twice with the band I had then. We basically we were just playing in a tiny little bar one night in Brixham, and there was a guy there, and he was pretty drunk. He was wearing like a off-white suit, and he was drinking red wine and was dancing really camp all night. And I was ripping it out of him on the mic, like all night. I was absolutely slamming him. But he was loving it, and he came up the end of the night and handed me a business card, and I gave him my card and stuff like that. And he was warbling on about stuff. Anyway, he rang me like a week or two later and was like, I want to pay for you guys to do an EP. I want to get you into the studio. I've got this like management company, blah, blah. And he did. And he took us to the States, and we recorded a full album in Philadelphia. And you know, I got to do some cool stuff. So it felt like everything was going in the right direction. So I made this big decision, like, okay, I'm not going to go to uni. I'm not going to do law. I'm going to go and, you know, try and become a rock star. And it almost felt like, actually, fuck, I'm doing
Yeah.
it, you know, like it's actually working out. But you know, it wasn't the substance where the songs weren't good. And I was, you know, I think I was a good front man. My voice wasn't strong enough. I could play guitar well. I could put on a show, and that would kind of like hook people in. But the substance, in order to get big, you got to have the songs there. The vocal has to be stronger. And ultimately, it all fell apart. But I had a great go. And actually, that was part of what kind of led me more towards the fighting, because kind of like the feeling that dejected after thinking, yeah, I had a lot of people around me. I was 18 years old. A lot of people around me going, "Yeah, you're a superstar. You're going to be huge." Blah blah blah. And you're 18 years old. You believe it. And I remember like just thinking, like, this is my life now. I'm just going to be touring the world, and like, here we go. Yeah, touring the States. And I just really took it all for granted. And I don't really have many regrets in life, but that was always probably the only thing I ever regretted in my life. I don't now, because luckily I've been very fortunate to have another shot at it. But I didn't think I'd ever get another shot at music. And even when I was doing the fighting stuff, I loved it. But I always look back and was like, I wish I, took it in more. We're going around New York, and I remember whinging because I couldn't be asked to go up the Empire State Building and like stuff like that. And now I'm like, I really want to go back to New York and like see the Empire State Building. And I remember owning like, oh, I can't be bothered. I was just such a little dick. And so, when I got the second chance this time round and things started working, obviously the music industry was completely different. I managed to start going through just posting stuff online and, getting traction that way. And, you can email people and send them videos, and everything was just a lot easier this time around. It would have been like almost 15 years on from when I first, tried to make it as an 18-year-old. And yeah, I've lost my train of thought now, but
you said you'd like just embracing the moment, really, rather
yeah.
than...
So that's yeah. So now, like, I don't take anything for granted, and I see it as like, I'm very, very fortunate to have got to do this again, and so what we're doing now is a million times better than what I was doing back then. So yeah, I see myself as very fortunate, and I never ever take it for granted.
Tell me the first record you remember buying from a record store, please, Chris.
Well, the first single I remember buying. I had to think about this one long and hard, because it's quite tricky with singles. But I remember, I don't know if this was the very first, but it was definitely one of the early ones when I first started getting my pocket money and going down to the record store each week. We had an hour price in town with one of those little towers that you could listen to the songs on. It was Charlie Big Potato by Skunk Anansie. I had a couple of Skunk Anansie tracks just on like rock compilations, like it would have been like Hedonism and Weak. And I was just drawn into Skin's voice. But I remember buying this one because it came with like a little postcard with like a free postage thing on it to join their fan club. And I remember just feeling like, oh yeah, no, I'll do it. And I posted it away. And then for years, I was getting Skunk Anansie's like updates coming through the post, like probably like until I was like in my 20s, until maybe that kind of thing like stopped.
Yeah.
So it's one that I definitely remember fondly, if not just for that reason, joining the fan club. It's the only fan club I've ever joined. So.
I mean, could you sort of, hearing sort of Skunk Anansie as a young lad, could you draw the parallels to sort of see where potentially Ace's influences would have come from some of the stuff that your dad was playing you growing up? And also you mentioned sort of Paul Rodgers and stuff like that, just the way that he would scream. He's, could you see those sort of parallels in kind of rock music that even sort of would play through sort of Skin's vocals? Because she had she has got a fantastic rock voice, it's so soulful as well, but it just kind of, it goes all over the fucking place.
Yeah. I mean, like you said, like Ace guitar playing, like riff wise, some of those could be lifted from a Zeppelin album, and so yeah, definitely that's probably one of the things that would have drawn me in for sure. I've always been a sucker for a good riff and a good groove as well. That's what they always had, always, like, groove along. I love riffs that groove. And yeah, I mean, Zeppelin probably one of the first lot to have kicked that kind of thing off, I reckon.
Absolutely. Well, let's keep that groove going, because for track 5, I'm going to ask you to tell me the song that soundtracked your years clubbing, please, Chris.
Well, I wasn't really much of a clubber, and
Right.
I've always been like a rock and metaler. And part of the reason I didn't really go clubbing that much was because I was gigging all the time.
Yeah.
And then I started fighting at 19, and I got super strict, and I wasn't drinking, dieting, and all this kind of stuff, and I was fighting quite regularly. So I wasn't a mad clubhead, but I did go out a few times. But there is one song from that kind of era that, if you put it on now, will make me smile, and I've always loved, and that's "Free" by Ultranate.
Yeah.
You know, and that again, it's just a chorus thing for me, like such a catchy chorus.
Yeah.
And it's a great tune. Like I remember I used to do like a little acoustic version of it because the chorus is so strong.
Yeah.
Like
It's huge.
play some chords and some acoustic, some acoustic chords and sing that. Like it works perfectly as just like a normal, you know, soft rock song or acoustic
Yeah.
song. Do you know what I mean? So yeah, for me that's a bit of a banger.
Absolutely. And it's just, it's not just a beat with a little vocal over it. It's a song. It's a really well structured song,
Yeah.
and yeah, it's a fantastic record. I mean, in regards to sort of around sort of Torquay and stuff, like what was going on? Like, was there alternative rock bars and stuff like that, and places to kind of hang out and listen to the stuff that you really liked?
Growing up, it kind of shut probably when I became an adult. There was a place called Hideaway that was kind of like the local metal club. That was pretty cool. Then it closed down, but there was just a really strong cover band scene. Like back then we would, on a Sunday, we'd do an afternoon slot somewhere, and then we'd go somewhere else and do an evening slot, and we were paid the same, if not more, than what I know local bands are getting paid now.
Yeah.
Like 20 years on, like it's crazy. Um, it and you'd just be playing to hundreds of people. Like, so yeah, I was very fortunate to have that. I mean, for one time I had a drummer. I was in between drummers in the band at the time, and guitarist in the band, his cousin was a session drummer in London. Played with lots of different people. He did drum teching for Stuart Copeland, for Police.
Wow.
Yeah, and but he also played drums for Tattoo. Do you remember that? The Russian lesbian thing.
One of the greatest singles ever recorded.
Um, I don't know what they are, but yeah, the Tattoo lot. And he used to do like Top of the Pops with them and SMTV Live. But he used to drive down at the weekend and do gigs with us. He'd be like, I can earn more money down here playing with you guys than I can up around London. Yeah, he's like, you guys have got a bubble down here, and he says it's incredible. So he used to come down every weekend, do like 3-4 gigs with us, and then go back. So yeah, I was very fortunate to have that. It was a lot of great bars where
Fantastic.
back in the days where it was £2 a pint.
Oh, miss them days. I'm going to stay there then, because for track 6, I'm going to ask you to tell my favourite song from an artist from your home county, please.
Yeah, so obviously I'm from Devon, and probably the most famous rock band from around here is 10 minutes down the road from me. It's Muse. They're just a little bit older than me, so I didn't really come across them when they were on the local scene. Lots of my friends who are like a couple of years older than me remember when I think they had a different name when they started out, and they used to gig around, much in the way that I used to. And they remember it really, really well. Muse recorded their first EP in the studio where I used to teach guitar.
Right.
Yeah, that was it was before they got signed and all stuff like that. But maybe it was the one like that got them signed. Yeah. I'm not sure, but yeah, my favorite track from them is Hysteria. I'm not like an avid Muse fan. Like I'm probably like 50-50. Like there'll be a track and I'm like, this is really, really cool. And then there's other stuff I'm like, this isn't my vibe. But I think that kind of is Muse. I think they are quite Marmite. And I think if you look at a lot of like the huge bands in the world, like rock bands, I think they're always a little bit Marmite. Those guys sell out stadiums. Like it's insane what they've achieved. There's not many rock bands that get to that level. And they are quite polarizing. Like I said, sometimes I'm not into it. Gets a bit too theatrical for me, maybe. But Hysteria for me, I said the riff groove. I'm like, yeah, I'm into that.
I'm exactly the same. I'm not a huge fan. I think it gets very theatrical in places. I'm not a big fan of when he sings falsetto.
Yeah.
But they were one of them bands, and there wasn't many of them, that when they were coming through, they'd be on the cover of Kerrang and they'd be on the cover of the NME. And there's not many bands that transcend both And Muse managed to do that. And I think that's a big part of why they're so big, because the indie kids were loving them, your metal kids were loving them, and it was just, oh, right, they've ticked all the boxes here. And I saw them very, very early on, and on the recommendation that someone said, there's a new Radiohead. And I was like, really? And I was like, come and watch this band. They're like Radiohead, and they fucking have it. And I went, and I remember hearing Muscle Museum and Sunburn and stuff, and thinking, fuck me, this is insane. And when I heard them early singles and saw them live, they took my fucking head off. It was like unreal. And then after that, for me, it just, I don't know, they lost me then. I loved Plug-in Baby. I thought it was a fantastic pop single.
Yep.
But yeah, then it just, don't know. Oh wait, what's the one that sounds like Prince? Supermassive Black Hole. I quite like that. That's got a fucking groove, that has.
Yeah.
But
I mean, their last album, there's like some like pretty brutal parts
yeah,
on it. Like it goes pretty heavy in places. Yeah, I mean, I got all the respect in the world from like it. There's only kind of two bands maybe in recent years that can kind of go from rock crowds to more of like the pop crowd, and to do like the size shows that they do. And I think it's them and probably Foo Fighters.
absolutely.
You can turn on Radio 1 and Muse can just be played all day. Foo
Yeah.
Fighters can be played all day. It's very, very hard for rock bands to get
Massively.
that kind of opportunity, or to be able to sit in that little crevice. It's quite a, I don't know. It's quite it's probably a bit of a tightrope, really. To be
Absolutely.
rock fans, but also to be commercial enough that you're on, daytime TV and stuff.
Yeah.
Like
it's crazy.
Yeah, and there's not many bands that do it.
No, that's a very exclusive club that a lot of bands would like to be part of. I know.
Yeah, for sure.
All right. Well, look, last track, Christian. You get to be a tastemaker here. So I'm going to ask you to tell me a song that you think many listeners may not know that you would like them to hear.
Well, it's a song from a guy that I think is criminally underrated. I think he is just one of the most talented vocalists, guitar players ever. It's a guy called Richie Kotzen. So he's been a solo artist for years. He also plays in a band these days called Winery Dogs. He actually joined Poison, replacing CeCe DeVille in like the late 80s or early 90s. And then he replaced Paul Gilbert and Mr. Big. But his solo stuff is just incredible. Like, he's an amazing songwriter. His voice is insane. And his guitar playing is just next level too. And he kind of like, I've picked a song that's kind of it's fairly commercial, I suppose. It's one of his more chilled songs, catchy. It's probably a bit more straightforward compared to some of the stuff he's done. But like, he's got like instrumental shred stuff, he's got jazz fusion stuff, he's got blues, he's got metal, he's got prog, he's got all this kind of like all these different elements. And it's always someone that I've looked up to, and I've actually been fortunate enough to become friends with him over the past couple of years. He was a friend of a friend. So I've got to know him, and he's a great guy, but incredible. Like, I mean, I remember once we'd been at NAMM, and a big music convention thing in Anaheim, California, and I was around his house, and it was like lunchtime, and he'd had a gig the night before. It was kind of a bit of a secret show, like they popped up and did a show, the Winery Dogs, and I was talking to him about his voice and stuff. He's like, "Oh yeah, held up really well." He's like, "We hadn't done a show for a while." He goes, "I wasn't sure how my voice would be." I was like, "Oh, what's your kind of like regime? Like, do you have to warm up?" And so like, because I've got to do like so much stuff to like be able to get my voice even like half presentable. He's like, "Oh no, just do this," and then just like let off this crazy like vocal riff, like they have like red wine and cheese in his kitchen. Like, he just does this crazy like vocal thing. I had like no warm up, nothing. I'm just like, all right, cool, yeah, no, I'll probably try that. Right, is that all you do? That's it? Is it? All right, cool, easy. But yeah, incredible talent, and yeah, a really, really cool guy.
Oh, fantastic. Well, Chris, we put together a Spotify playlist to accompany the podcast with all of your song picks on there. And obviously we'll add your music to that as well. So let's talk about your music. What's happening, mate?
I've got a brand new album out Friday, 12th of April. It's called Halo Effect. Very excited about it. It's I think it's a big step up from stuff we've done before. So when I started out with this kind of thing, I was more like in like the blues rocky world. Then I kind of did like 3 bluesy albums, but gradually getting a bit heavier with each one, more rock than blues. And then the pandemic hit, and everything I was writing was just heavier. All those early influences that we spoke about today from my teens were coming out. And I released like a heavier rock album, Death Valley Paradise, 22. And this one is just a continuation of that, really. I think if we came out with this as my last album, it would have been like too much of a crazy jump. But Death Valley Paradise has kind of bridged us, and now I just feel like I'm at home, really. Like I love playing the blues stuff. It's good fun. But as a songwriter and as a musician and an artist, there's a lot more to me than that. And this album, I really get to explore that. I worked a lot on my vocals, really pushing out, you know, uh, different techniques, a lot of different melodies, different range. And the same with my guitar playing, stuff that I couldn't get away with within the very narrow blues rock genre. On this album, I can just let rip and do what I want to do. Production wise, we've really gone to town on it. It's a lot more modern sounding, nicking some of those kind of Linkin Park electronica elements that we spoke about before. But yeah, I'm super excited about it. All the singles so far have been really well received. Pre-orders have been amazing. We're in with a shot of hitting the UK top 10.
Amazing.
So fingers crossed. Well, we're not there yet. But yeah, fingers crossed. So if you want to help support us, get on iTunes, download it, or if you want CD or vinyl, head to earache.com.
Fantastic.
Yeah.
And gigs?
Gigs, yeah. The tour starts as well. I mean, we kicked off with a hometown show on Saturday night in Torquay. That was sold out. It was an amazing night. That's kind of like the album launch show. We did like a playback like through the PA of the albums first, like anyone could get to hear it before it's released. And then it rolls on this weekend from album release day. We start in Southampton, go to Wolverhampton, Manchester, Glasgow, Newcastle, Nottingham, and London. So
fantastic.
Be good.
And if people want to buy tickets and keep up the speed with everything that you're doing, where's the best place to follow you, Chris?
I mean, all usual social media. Check out chrisbarrisband.com or head to our website. That was our website, chrisbarrisband.com, or whatever. Any of the usual social media, we're on the lot.
Fantastic. Well, if it's cool with you, Chris, when we drop this episode, we'll tag you in it also. If people aren't following you already, we'll make it nice and easy for them to go and find you.
Perfect. Thank you.
Chris, it's been an absolute pleasure talking records with you, mate. Thank you so much.
Nice one. Nice to meet you.
Absolute pleasure. I'm going to press stop. Don't go anywhere.